I've seen countless horrible applications of So you want to build a pergola in your backyard? Well, make sure you do it right or you're gonna look like a fool. I'm Brendan with theluxurypergola.com, and today we're gonna be going over the top 5 mistakes people make when building a pergola in their backyard. Now, building a pergola may sound like a simple task. You just buy some materials, put it in your yard, and build it, right? Wrong, so wrong. And with this information, you will avoid having a broken pergola, having to rebuild it, or getting fined by your building department. So let's get into it. Now, the first mistake people make is overestimating material strength. So let's do a couple examples. Let's say you have a 2x6 piece of, here it's gonna be southern yellow pine. So you got a 2x6 piece of wood and you try to make a really long clear span, let's say 20 feet from post to post. If you have too much weight on that clear span, it's gonna start to sag in the middle. We also start to see that with the really thin extrusions for some of the other aluminum pergola kits, where you'll have a really long distance between posts. When you stand back, it looks like the beam is smiling at you. And when it's sagging like that, whether it be the thin material or the wood, you run a lot of risks. One, it can shear, it can crack, it can fall on somebody while you're sitting under it. It just weakens the unit really quickly over time. So how do we avoid this? One is gonna be read the specs. And sometimes it's really hard to see or get those specs. The one thing you're gonna look for is deflection under load. And that will be expressed as usually 1 over a number. Now that deflection value is going to be under load. So that's gonna be under heavy snow loads with snow sitting on top of it, or heavy wind loads with the wind blowing. And when you go to a building department, they're gonna wanna know how much it can handle at the same time. So you may have a 20-pound ground snow load and 130-mile-an-hour wind load. You need to be able to hit both of those simultaneously. And if you want to know what your local building codes look like, we have it on our website. Just hit Get Building Codes, put in your zip code, and you'll get a pretty good idea. So when in doubt, over-engineer it. And if you have really thin material or a smaller 2x4, 2x6, you may need to either add extra material, so add extra support, or add a post to remove some of that deflection. It's kind of a better safe than sorry. Mistake number 2 is poorly fastening the unit. Now with this tip, it's kind of twofold. One, you want to make sure you have the right fasteners, whether it be into concrete, the house, whatever. You need to make sure you get the right kind of fasteners. If you're using little deck screws, that's not going to help you when the wind starts blowing and your pergola flies away to the magical land of Oz. The next one's fastening surface. Let's say you have a freestanding pergola. If you attach that directly to, let's say, pavers, that's not going to be structurally sound. There's not enough counterweight to handle the wind. More often than not, you need to have concrete pier footings or a really, really thick concrete pad to attach to. Sometimes decks can work, but that really comes down to how the deck is built and whether you fasten into the framing members or not. Now, let's say you're getting really creative and you want to fasten it to a house. That can get tricky. So it depends what siding you have, but let's say you have vinyl siding on the house. You will need to make sure that you use the proper fastener. I like to use lag bolts, but everybody's got their own preference. And I like to make sure it hits every stud along the wall. Some people say 1 stud or 2 studs. In my experience, it's better safe than sorry, because if 1 or 2 fail, or let's say you miss the stud entirely, that thing's coming down. So the solution to this is, if you're buying a prefab kit, make sure that you use the included fasteners when attaching to the ground. For us, it's gonna be this. So this is a really tough concrete anchor, which helps to make sure when the wind blows, it doesn't lift up off the ground. And make sure that the surface you're fastening to is strong and stable, like a concrete pad or concrete pier footings. And if you're attaching to a house, again, make sure you get the right fastener with the right withdrawal resistance to keep everything strong and stable. Mistake number 3, making it way too big. Now this may sound counterintuitive being a pergola manufacturer. I want to sell as much as possible, right? Well, sometimes you can go overboard. So if you go too long or too wide, you may not actually be able to fit it in your space. For example, if you have a 10x20 concrete pad, let's say it's exactly 10x20, you do not want to buy an exactly 10x20 pergola. Now, why is that? When you measure that 10x20, it's from outside of post to outside of post, at least with us. There is a post base on the bottom of that post, which extends beyond that 10x20. If you go exactly 10x20 with your pergola on a 10x20 pad, you will not be able to hit the concrete when you try to fasten it down. And if it's not our unit and you go too big, you may run the risk of sagging in the middle, of posts deflecting inwards, and just a weaker structure overall. Now that we've gone over length and width, you have to worry about height. It's not unusual for people to plan out their space and not take into account the height. Let's say you're trying to get it under a gutter or a soffit. If you don't plan ahead on that, your pergola may be too tall to fit under that gutter or soffit like you planned. So how do we avoid this mistake? Measure everything at least twice, and then be careful when you're ordering not to overbuy. So I like to say, measure twice, order once. And again, the bigger the pergola, the more weight you need to support. There's just more material the bigger you go. Mistake number 4 is not checking with building departments or HOAs. Now, if where you live, you're subject to an HOA or a building department, you should probably make sure that what you're building is okay with them. If you know you don't have this issue, disregard. But let's say you do have an HOA or a building authority. If you build this unit without verifying it's okay to do so, you could have some well-meaning building department official just driving around trying to find pergolas and people like you. And he's gonna see that, check his sheet, and realize, oh, he didn't get a permit, which is a cardinal sin to these people. So you're gonna get fined. They're gonna ask you to tear it down, rebuild it, inspect it. That initial fee you would have paid for your permit is gonna pale in comparison to what this building official is gonna do to you. So what do you do to avoid this mistake? 1, check online. In my experience, if I were to call a building official and say, hey, I have this huge project I'm doing, do I need a permit? The answer is only gonna be one thing. Yes, you do. Where's my $50? So be vague, say, hey, I'm thinking about building some kind of an outdoor structure. What do I need to go through here? And they can guide you pretty well on that. But make sure that you understand exactly what you're gonna be doing, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and you do not want the eye of Sauron or that building official looking at you. And also reach out to your HOA just to make sure they're allowed. They're not gonna look at the building specs necessarily, they're gonna be more focused on the aesthetics. But still, make sure you talk to them because they're even worse to deal with than building officials. Now, mistake number 5 is buying all of the accessories, every last one of them right off the bat. Now again, this is gonna be counterintuitive since I sell this stuff, but you generally don't need all of it right away. So let's say you're building this outdoor pergola and you decide, hey, there's some accessories. And you decide you want a fan, you want lights, you want a heater, you want a projector, you want a brand new TV. And then you find out you only use 1 or 2 of those things. And then you're out all that money. So what we usually recommend is build the structure. Get the stuff you know you actually want. And then as you start to use it, see what you're actually gonna need. We wouldn't want you to buy every single thing under the sun and then a year later come back and say, man, I really messed up. I shouldn't have bought the 5 extra things. And personally for us, a really common one is drop screens. We hear a lot, hey, I wanna cover the entire thing in drop screens. But in reality, they only wanna cover the west side because that's what they use and that's where the sun sets. So they overpaid for 3 extra shades when they really only use 1. So to reiterate, buy your structure first, then come back and add the accessories as needed. Congrats, you are now equipped to not screw up your backyard renovation. Now look, we've all screwed up a home project ourselves, at least once or twice in our life. When I was putting my pergola up, I put the footings in the wrong spot. What are some of the mistakes you made on your home renovations? Go ahead and drop them in the comments. And any other tips for building an outdoor structure, go ahead and throw them in there as well. So thanks for watching. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.